Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because their mind was never trained for pressure. You were taught to chase motivation. You were taught to wait until you feel ready. And that's exactly why you quit when things get uncomfortable. This audiobook will show you how to build a mind that doesn't collapse under stress. A mind that keeps moving when motivation disappears. A mind that doesn't quit when life gets hard. This is not about hype. It's about mental toughness. And it starts now. Let's get one thing clear immediately. If you are waiting for life to feel easier before you commit, you will never commit. That's not pessimism. That's reality. Hard moments are not a signal that something is wrong. They are the signal that something is working. Resistance is not a warning sign. Resistance is the price of progress. Say that again. Resistance is the price of progress. Every meaningful skill, every worthwhile goal, every version of you that is stronger than the current one, comes wrapped in discomfort. And most people never learn this. They grow up believing that struggle means they're failing. That difficulty means they chose the wrong path. That if something feels hard, it must not be meant for them. That belief quietly ruins lives. Because the moment pressure shows up, they panic. They hesitate. They quit. Not because they can't handle the work, but because they misinterpret the feeling. You have a choice. You can interpret discomfort as danger, or you can interpret discomfort as instruction. That's the key. Most students quit not because the task is impossible, but because it feels unfamiliar, frustrating, and slow. They study for 2 hours and feel tired. They try to build a habit and feel resistance. They start improving their life and feel uncomfortable. And immediately they think, something is wrong. No. Something is right. Growth does not feel like motivation videos. It feels like friction. It feels like confusion before clarity. It feels like effort before confidence. It feels like resistance before strength. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. Let's talk about why this matters. The mind is lazy by default. It is designed to conserve energy, avoid pain, and seek familiarity. So when you challenge it, by studying longer, by saying no to distractions, by doing work that actually matters, your mind pushes back. That pushback is normal. But untrained minds treat resistance like an emergency. They think, I'm not motivated. I don't feel confident. This shouldn't be this hard. And that emotional reaction becomes an excuse. They stop. They delay. They distract. That's not intelligence. That's avoidance. High performers understand something different. They expect resistance. They plan for it. They train inside it. They don't argue with it. They don't ask, why is this hard? They ask, can I stay here longer? That's the difference. You don't build mental toughness by avoiding difficulty. You build it by staying present while it exists. You don't need their permission to struggle. You don't need motivation to continue. You need standards. And standards don't care how you feel. Here's a truth most people never accept. If something is important, it will feel hard at first. If something is changing you, it will resist you. If something is building you, it will challenge you. That's not a flaw in the process. That is the process. It's not about talent. It's about tolerance for discomfort. Now let's make this practical. The next time you sit down to work, and your mind feels restless, irritated, or bored, do not label that as failure. Label it as training. Say to yourself, this feeling is the cost. This feeling is the weight. This feeling is doing its job. Resistance is the price of progress. That's the key. Instead of asking, how do I make this easier? Ask, how do I stay anyway? Because every time you stay, when quitting feels logical, you are rewiring your identity. You are becoming someone who does not collapse under pressure. Most people train when it feels good. Winners train when it feels heavy. You have a choice. You can keep expecting ease and live a life that never grows. Or you can expect resistance and become someone who adapts. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is forcing yourself through pain. It's not. Discipline is removing surprise. It's knowing in advance that things will feel uncomfortable and continuing anyway. You stop negotiating. You stop dramatizing. You stop personalizing the discomfort. You just execute. It's not about motivation. It's about commitment. It's not about confidence. It's about consistency. It's not about feeling ready. It's about showing up when you don't. And once you understand this, something changes. Hard days stop feeling personal. Resistance stops feeling emotional. Difficulty stops controlling your decisions. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" You say, "This is part of it." That shift alone separates average lives from exceptional ones. Let me be very clear. There is nothing wrong with you because it feels hard. There is something wrong with the expectation that it shouldn't. You were never promised ease. You were promised opportunity. And opportunity always demands effort. So from this moment forward, adopt this rule. When things feel hard, you do not retreat. You slow down. You simplify. You stay. You don't need their permission. You don't need reassurance. You don't need hype. You need to stop running from resistance. Because resistance is not your enemy. Resistance is the training ground. And once you accept that, once you stop expecting ease, you stop quitting prematurely. You become dangerous in the best way. You mastered the understanding of struggle. Now, it's time to learn what pressure really reveals. Pressure reveals the real you. Anyone can perform when life is calm. Anyone can feel confident when there's no deadline. Anyone can stay disciplined when nothing is at stake. Anyone can look capable when conditions are perfect. That proves nothing. Pressure is the test. And here is the truth most people avoid. Pressure doesn't change you. It shows you. Say it again. Pressure doesn't change you. It shows you. When life applies weight, it reveals what habits were actually built. Not what you talked about. Not what you planned. Not what you imagined yourself to be. Only what you trained. This is where illusions die. You don't discover who you are when things are easy. You discover who you are when you're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, and tempted to quit. That moment tells the truth. And most people don't like what they see. Think about exams. Calm weeks before the test, students feel confident. They say they understand the material. They say they'll handle it. Then pressure arrives. Time limits. Mental fatigue. Consequences. And suddenly, memory disappears. Focus collapses. Emotions take control. Why? Because confidence without training collapses under stress. Pressure didn't ruin them. Pressure revealed them. Deadlines work the same way. When there's plenty of time, people plan. They feel motivated. They promise themselves they'll start tomorrow. Then the deadline closes in. Sleep drops. Anxiety spikes. Distractions increase. And instead of execution, there's panic. Again, pressure didn't create weakness. It exposed the lack of systems. Financial stress is even more brutal. When money is stable, discipline feels optional. People talk about budgeting. They talk about responsibility. Then pressure hits. Unexpected bills. Reduced income. Fear. And suddenly habits vanish. Impulse decisions increase. Emotional spending takes over. Avoidance replaces planning. Pressure didn't make them irresponsible. It revealed the absence of structure. This pattern is everywhere. Pressure is a spotlight. And the spotlight never lies. You have a choice here. You can fear pressure, or you can use it as feedback. That's the key. Most people try to avoid pressure their entire lives. They want comfort. They want certainty. They want reassurance. But avoiding pressure guarantees weakness. Because strength is never built in comfort. It's built in controlled stress. Athletes understand this. They don't train when they feel good. They train to perform when they don't. Soldiers understand this. They don't wait for calm conditions. They train under chaos, so chaos doesn't control them. Surgeons understand this. They practice until execution is automatic, because in real moments, emotion is a liability. Students and young adults are rarely taught this. They're taught to prepare when it feels manageable. They're taught to stop when it feels overwhelming. That creates fragile minds. And fragile minds break under pressure. It's not about talent. It's about discipline under stress. That's the standard. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If pressure makes you freeze, panic, procrastinate, or quit, that is not a character flaw. It is a training issue. And training issues can be fixed. But only if you stop lying to yourself. Pressure reveals whether you built habits or hopes. Hope collapses. Habits execute. That's the difference. So what do you do with this? You stop judging yourself emotionally, and start studying yourself honestly. The next time pressure shows up, pay attention. When stress increases, do you default to structure or distraction? When deadlines close in, do you simplify or spiral? When fear appears, do you act or avoid? Those answers matter more than motivation ever will. Because they tell you what must be trained. You don't need their permission to train under pressure. You don't need confidence to start. You need exposure. Small. Controlled. Repeated. This is how you build a pressure-ready mind. You intentionally practice when conditions aren't ideal. You study when tired. You work when bored. You stay consistent when motivation disappears. Not perfectly, but deliberately. You stop asking, "How do I feel today?" and start asking, "What does the system require?" It's not about feelings. It's about discipline. You don't wait for calm to return. You don't wait for confidence to appear. You act while pressure exists. That's how pressure stops being scary. Because familiarity kills fear. The more often you execute under stress, the less power stress has over you. That's the key. Most people think pressure is the enemy. It's not. Pressure is the test environment. It shows you exactly what needs work. And once you stop taking it personally, you can start taking it seriously. You don't say, "I'm bad under pressure." You say, "I haven't trained this scenario yet." That mindset alone changes everything. Because it replaces shame with strategy. Pressure is not a verdict. It's a report. And reports are useful, if you read them. So from this point forward, adopt this rule. When pressure appears, you do not retreat. You observe. You adjust. You repeat. You build habits that survive stress. You simplify systems so they don't collapse. You remove unnecessary decisions. You reduce emotional negotiation. You act. Because the goal is not to eliminate pressure. The goal is to become stable inside it. You don't need their permission to handle pressure differently. You don't need validation. You don't need praise. You need discipline that doesn't panic. Pressure will keep coming. Life guarantees that. The only question is whether it will expose weakness or confirm strength. You've learned what pressure really does. Now it's time to learn why listening to your feelings under pressure ruins consistency. Feelings are not commands. Let's say this clearly. Your feelings are not instructions. They are signals. Say it again. Feelings are information, not authority. Most people never learn this. And it quietly controls their entire life. They wake up and ask, how do I feel today? If they feel good, they act. If they feel bad, they hesitate. If they feel uncertain, they wait. And without realizing it, they hand control of their future to emotions that change by the hour. That is not self-awareness. That is self-sabotage. Feelings are temporary. They rise. They fall. They contradict each other. Results require consistency. And consistency cannot depend on mood, that's the key. Students struggle here more than they realize. They say, I don't feel confident enough to start. I don't feel motivated today. I don't feel ready. So they delay action. Meanwhile, someone else starts anyway. Unsure. Unpolished. Imperfect. And that person wins. Not because they felt better, but because they acted anyway. Confidence does not come first. Action does. Waiting to feel confident is a trap. Because confidence is built by evidence. And evidence only comes from repetition. You don't feel confident, then act. You act, then confidence follows. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Here's the problem with treating feelings like commands. When you're tired, feelings say stop. When you're bored, feelings say distract. When you're uncomfortable, feelings say escape. If you obey every feeling, you train weakness. You teach your mind that discomfort equals danger. You teach yourself that effort is optional. You reinforce avoidance. That's not freedom. That's fragility. High performers understand something simple. They let feelings exist, but they don't let feelings decide. They don't argue with emotions. They don't suppress them. They just don't obey them. Feelings are information, not authority. That's the rule. Let's make this practical. The next time you sit down to work and you feel resistance, tight chest, wandering mind, low energy, do not ask how to remove the feeling. Ask how to continue with it present. Because the goal is not to feel good. The goal is to execute. You don't need your feelings' permission to act. You don't need motivation's approval. You don't need confidence to show up. You have a choice. You can obey feelings, or you can obey standards. That's the key. Here's a dangerous lie people believe. If it feels wrong, it must be wrong. Not true. Many of the most correct actions feel uncomfortable at first. Studying feels boring. Training feels tiring. Growth feels unfamiliar. Your feelings are calibrated for comfort, not for progress. So if you use feelings as a compass, you will walk in circles. It's not about emotional intelligence. It's about emotional discipline. You feel fear. You act anyway. You feel doubt. You act anyway. You feel resistance. You act anyway. And something powerful happens. Your mind learns that feelings don't control outcomes. Your nervous system adapts. Discomfort loses its authority. That's how consistency is built. Most students who fail aren't lazy. They're emotionally obedient. They wait for the right mood. They wait for the right feeling. They wait for confidence to arrive. And they wait themselves out of opportunity. Meanwhile, disciplined people operate differently. They say, this is scheduled. This is non-negotiable. This happens whether I feel like it or not. Not because they're robotic, but because they're free. Freedom is not doing what you feel. Freedom is doing what you decided. That distinction matters. Let's talk about uncertainty. Acting while unsure feels wrong at first. Your brain wants certainty before movement. But certainty comes from movement. Clarity is not a prerequisite. It's a byproduct. You don't need their permission to be uncertain. You don't need reassurance. You don't need guarantees. You move forward anyway. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Here's a rule to adopt immediately. When emotion conflicts with commitment, commitment wins. Every time. You don't negotiate. You don't debate. You don't dramatize. You execute. And over time, something changes. The emotional spikes get smaller. The resistance fades faster. The habit becomes automatic. Why? Because repetition trains identity. Your mind stops asking, "How do I feel?" and starts saying, "This is what I do." That's the transformation. Feelings still exist. They just stop being in charge. And that is the difference between people who start things and people who finish. You don't become disciplined by feeling disciplined. You become disciplined by acting without permission. Say it clearly. You don't need their permission. You don't need your feelings' permission either. You need a standard. And standards don't care about mood. You've learned to stop obeying feelings. Now it's time to build something stronger than emotion and identity that doesn't negotiate. Build identity before confidence. Most people are waiting for confidence. They say it openly. "I just need more confidence. I'll start when I feel confident. I'm not confident enough yet." And that single belief keeps them stuck for years. Here is the truth. Confidence is not the requirement. Confidence is the result. Say it again. Confidence is not the requirement. It is the result. Identity comes first. You don't act because you feel confident. You feel confident because you acted, repeatedly, consistently, without negotiation. That's the key. The mistake most students and young adults make is treating confidence like fuel. They think they need it to move. But confidence is not fuel. It is exhaust. It comes after the work has been done. Waiting for confidence before action is like waiting to feel strong before lifting weights. It doesn't work that way. Strength comes from lifting. Confidence comes from acting. It's not about self-belief. It's about self-trust. And self-trust is built through repetition. Let's talk about language. Language shapes identity. When you say, "I'm trying," you give yourself an exit. Trying implies uncertainty. Trying implies optional effort. Trying implies future failure is acceptable. "I'm trying" sounds harmless. It isn't. It trains your brain to expect inconsistency. Compare that to this sentence. "This is what I do." No emotion. No drama. No negotiation. Just identity. I study every day. I train 5 days a week. I show up even when it's uncomfortable. That language matters. Because the brain works to protect identity. If you say, "This is who I am," your actions align faster. If you say, "I'm trying," your actions hesitate. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can keep describing yourself as someone in progress, or you can start acting like someone with standards. That's the key. Here's what most people misunderstand. Identity is not something you find. It's something you earn. You don't decide who you are by thinking. You decide by doing. Every repeated action casts a vote. One workout doesn't make you disciplined. One study session doesn't make you focused. But repeated behavior builds evidence. And evidence builds trust. And trust becomes confidence. Not fake confidence. Not motivational confidence. Real confidence. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need validation. You don't need their permission to define yourself differently. You don't need approval. You don't need reassurance. You need repetition. Let's get practical. If you want the identity of a focused person, you don't wait to feel focused. You remove distractions. You set a time. You sit down. Even if your mind wanders. Even if the session is imperfect. You show up. That's how identity is built. If you want the identity of someone who doesn't quit, you don't wait to feel resilient. You finish what you start, especially when it's boring. That's how trust is built. Most people chase confidence because they don't trust themselves yet. And instead of building trust, they keep waiting. That loop never ends. Here's the rule. Confidence follows evidence. Evidence follows action. Action follows standards. Not feelings. It's not about belief. It's about discipline. Every time you do what you said you would do, even in small ways, you deposit into self-trust. Every time you don't, you withdraw. Eventually, your balance shows. Confident people are not magical. They're consistent. They don't talk more. They don't hype themselves up. They just keep promises to themselves. That's it. And this is why identity matters more than goals. Goals live in the future. Identity lives in the present. Goals say, one day I will. Identity says, this is what I do today. That's the key. If you keep saying, I'm trying to be disciplined, you will always feel like an imposter. If you start saying, I don't skip, your behavior changes faster. You stop negotiating. You stop debating. You stop waiting for confidence. You act. And slowly, quietly, confidence shows up on its own. You don't announce it. You don't chase it. You notice it after the fact. One day you realize you don't panic like you used to. One day you realize you don't hesitate as much. One day you realize you trust yourself. That's when confidence becomes real. And it only comes one way. Through repetition. You have a choice. You can keep trying, or you can start deciding. You can keep waiting, or you can start becoming. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Identity is not a statement. It's a pattern. So from this point forward, adopt this rule. Do not ask, do I feel confident? Ask, what would someone like me do next? Then do that. Even if it feels uncomfortable. Even if it feels awkward. Even if it feels boring. Especially then. Because identity is built when motivation is absent. You don't need their permission to change how you see yourself. You don't need proof in advance. You create proof through action. Confidence will catch up. It always does. You've learned how identity is built. Now it's time to learn how staying power is forged. Because starting is easy. Staying is rare. Learn to stay when quitting feels logical. Quitting rarely feels dramatic. It doesn't show up as weakness. It shows up as logic. I've done enough. This isn't working. I'll come back later. I deserve a break. That's why quitting is dangerous. Because in the moment, it makes sense. No alarms go off. No red flags wave. Your brain presents clean arguments. Reasonable explanations. Comfortable exits. And most people take them. Not because they're lazy. Not because they lack potential. But because they never trained staying power. That's the key. Staying is a skill. And like every skill, it must be trained deliberately. Especially when the effort is boring. Especially when the effort is frustrating. Especially when the effort is unrewarded. That's where staying power is built. Let's get something straight. Anyone can stay when results are visible. Anyone can stay when praise is flowing. Anyone can stay when progress is exciting. That's not discipline. That's motivation riding momentum. Discipline shows up when quitting feels reasonable. When nothing seems to be happening. When progress feels invisible. When effort feels pointless. That's the moment that matters. You have a choice. You can listen to the logic, or you can follow the standard you set earlier. Because quitting doesn't happen when things are impossible. It happens when things are uncomfortable for too long. Repeat this. You don't quit when it makes sense. You quit when you stop deciding. Say it again. You don't quit when it makes sense. You quit when you stop deciding. Most people think quitting is an action. It's not. Quitting is the absence of a decision. It's drifting. It's letting the moment decide for you. It's allowing emotion to overrule identity. That's why staying must be intentional. You don't feel your way through staying. You decide your way through it. Before the discomfort shows up. This is where most people fail. They decide only when things are hard. Too late. The decision to stay must be made before the resistance arrives. That's the key. You decide in advance. I finish what I start. I don't negotiate during discomfort. I don't quit on bad days. Then when the moment comes, there's no debate. No internal argument. No emotional trial. You already decided. Staying power is not about willpower. It's about rules. Clear rules beat emotional reasoning every time. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you only stay when it feels good, you are training yourself to quit. Every time you walk away because it's boring or frustrating, you reinforce the quitting identity. And identity compounds. Soon, quitting feels automatic, logical, even smart. That's how potential dies quietly. No collapse. No explosion. Just slow exits. But it works the other way too. Every time you stay when quitting feels reasonable, you strengthen a different identity. I'm someone who stays. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Silently. That identity is rare. And valuable. You don't need their permission to take longer than expected. You don't need approval to struggle in silence. You don't need validation to keep going without applause. Staying is personal. No one will clap for your boring effort. No one will notice your quiet consistency. That's the point. Staying power is built where attention is absent. Let's make this practical. Pick one area of your life where you usually quit early. Studying, training, learning a skill, building a habit. Now set one simple rule. Not a goal. A rule. I stay for the full session. I finish the set. I complete the task, even imperfectly. No exceptions based on mood. Then follow it, especially on days you want to stop. Those days matter more than the good ones. That's the key. Boredom is not a signal to stop. Frustration is not a warning sign. They are training grounds. When the effort feels unrewarded, you are doing the most important reps. Most people quit right before the compound effect kicks in. Because progress is delayed. Because results lag behind effort. And the brain hates delayed rewards. That's why discipline must override logic sometimes. Not reckless logic. Short-term logic. Long-term discipline always feels unreasonable in the short term. That's why few choose it. You have a choice. You can keep obeying the voice that says, "This is enough for today." Or you can obey the standard that says, "I stay because I decided to." Staying does not mean forcing forever. It means finishing the block you committed to. It means respecting your own word. Nothing builds self-trust faster. Nothing builds confidence deeper. And nothing separates serious people from dabblers more clearly. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Quitting isn't a character trait. It's a habit. And habits can be replaced. But only through repetition. You don't quit when it makes sense. You quit when you stop deciding. So decide again. Not emotionally. Logically. Decide who you are before the moment tests you. Because staying is how identity becomes permanent. You've learned how to act. You've learned how to stay. Now it's time to protect your energy. Because not everything deserves your reaction. Discipline is a system, not strength. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's strength. They think it's intensity. They think it's waking up every day feeling motivated and ready. That's a lie. Willpower runs out. Motivation fades. Emotion fluctuates. But systems stay. That's the key. If discipline depended on strength, only the loud and intense would win. But look around. The people who are consistent are rarely the most emotional. They are structured. They don't rely on how they feel. They rely on what they built. You don't rise to motivation. You fall to your systems. Say it again. You don't rise to motivation. You fall to your systems. That's the key. Every time you fail to show up, it's not because you're weak. It's because your system is weak. You're trying to fight friction instead of removing it. You're trying to make good decisions instead of making bad decisions harder. That's backwards. Discipline is not forcing yourself. It's designing your life so forcing is unnecessary. Let's break this down. When you wake up tired and unfocused, willpower is already low. When you've had a long day, decision fatigue sets in. By the time it's time to work, study, train, or focus, your strength is gone. And that's normal. That's why relying on strength is stupid. Smart people design systems that work even on bad days. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can keep blaming yourself for not being motivated, or you can build systems that don't require motivation. That's the key. Let's talk environment. Your environment is stronger than your intention. If distractions are within reach, you will use them. If junk is nearby, you will consume it. If comfort is easy, you will choose it. Not because you're flawed, but because you're human. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline starts with environment control. Remove what weakens you. Place what strengthens you in front of you. Phone away. Notifications off. Workspace clean. Not because you're extreme. Because you're serious. You don't need their permission to design your space for focus. You don't need approval to say no to constant stimulation. You don't owe distraction your attention. That's the key. Now let's talk schedules. People say, "I'll do it when I have time." That's not a plan. That's a wish. Time doesn't appear. It's allocated. High-discipline people don't ask, "How do I feel today?" They ask, "What's scheduled?" Once it's scheduled, the decision is gone. And that's powerful. Decision fatigue destroys discipline. Every choice drains energy. So reduce choices. Same time. Same place. Same routine. You're not boring. You're efficient. Routine is not limitation. It's freedom from mental noise. That's the key. Here's a simple rule. If something matters, it goes on the calendar. If it's not scheduled, it's optional. And optional habits don't survive stress. You have a choice. You can leave your discipline up to mood. Or you can lock it into structure. Now let's talk removal. This is where most people fail. They try to add discipline without removing temptation. That doesn't work. You can't out-discipline bad systems. If your phone is next to you, you will reach for it. If your bed is calling, you will answer. So remove. Delete apps. Block websites. Change locations. Make the wrong choice inconvenient. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. It's not about self-control. It's about system control. That's the key. High performers don't trust themselves in moments of weakness. They design around it. They assume fatigue. They assume resistance. They assume distraction. Then they build systems anyway. You should do the same. Let's get practical. Pick one habit you struggle with. Studying consistently. Working out. Deep focus. Now ask one question. What makes this harder than it needs to be? Then fix that. Not tomorrow. Now. Change the environment. Fix the schedule. Remove the friction. Small changes. Massive results. Because discipline compounds when systems support it. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel inspired. You just need the system to pull you forward. That's the key. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People who rely on motivation burn out. People who rely on systems outlast everyone. That's why calm, boring, structured people win in the long run. They're not special. They're prepared. You have a choice. You can keep trying harder, or you can design smarter. Trying harder is exhausting. Designing smarter is sustainable. And sustainability wins. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. And discipline is not strength. It's structure. Once your systems are solid, you don't argue with yourself anymore. You just execute. That's freedom. You've learned how to stay. You've learned how to design discipline. Now it's time to talk about something deeper. Because even the best systems fail if your standards are low. Next, we raise the bar. Stop measuring progress emotionally. Most people quit for one reason. They feel like nothing is working. Not because nothing is working, but because they're measuring the wrong thing. They measure progress emotionally. And emotional measurement creates instability. Some days feel heavy. Some days feel pointless. Some days feel like regression. But the work is still working. That's the disconnect. Your feelings are not a progress report. Say it again. Your feelings are not a progress report. That's the key. If you measure progress by mood, you'll sabotage consistency. Because moods fluctuate. Energy lies. Confidence comes and goes. But progress is built quietly, under the surface, long before it feels good. You have a choice. You can trust the process, or you can obey your emotions. Only one of those leads to results. High performers understand this. They don't ask, "Do I feel successful today?" They ask, "Did I do the work?" That's it. They track actions, not moods. That's the standard. Let's talk about what emotional measurement looks like. You study for weeks. You still feel behind. You train consistently. You still feel weak. You show up every day. You still feel uncertain. So you assume it's not working. Wrong. Growth is not felt in real time. It's revealed later. Emotional measurement tricks you into quitting early. And early quitting is expensive. It costs momentum. It costs belief. It costs identity. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Discipline means continuing even when the feedback is delayed. That's the key. Think about exams. You don't feel smarter every day you study. In fact, you often feel worse. Confused. Overwhelmed. Exposed. But that discomfort means your brain is stretching. Pressure doesn't feel like progress. It feels like strain. And strain is part of growth. Same with the gym. Same with skill building. Same with focus. If it felt good immediately, everyone would do it. You don't need their permission to keep going when it feels quiet. You don't need validation to trust effort without applause. Most progress happens without emotional confirmation. That's reality. Here's the rule you need to adopt. I measure effort. Results come later. Say it. I measure effort. Results come later. That's the key. Effort is measurable. Did you show up? Did you follow the system? Did you complete the reps? Yes or no? No drama. No emotion. Just data. When you track effort, your mind stabilizes. Because effort is always available. Motivation isn't. Confidence isn't. Energy isn't. But effort is. You have a choice. You can let a bad feeling day erase weeks of consistency. Or you can treat feelings like background noise. High performers do the second. They expect emotional inconsistency. They plan for it. They don't panic when they feel flat. They execute anyway. That's the difference. Let's talk about delayed rewards. The brain hates delayed gratification. It wants feedback now. Likes. Praise. Visible progress. But discipline operates on delay. You plant seeds today for a harvest you can't see yet. And emotional measurement keeps digging up the seeds to check if they're growing. That kills the process. You don't pull up roots to see if the plant is healthy. You water consistently. Same principle. It's not about flow. It's about discipline. Now let's get practical. You need objective metrics. Not feelings. Actions. Create a simple scoreboard. Hours studied. Workouts completed. Pages written. Sessions focused. Track those. Ignore the rest. If the actions are done, the day counts as a win. Even if it felt terrible. Especially if it felt terrible. That's the key. Bad feeling days with completed actions build resilience faster than good feeling days with excuses. That's how toughness is formed. Not through hype. Through consistency without emotional reward. You don't need your feelings' permission to keep going. You don't need to feel confident to act disciplined. Feelings are information, not authority. You learned that earlier. Now you apply it. Another trap. Comparison. You feel behind because you're watching others. That's emotional measurement too. You're measuring your internal struggle against someone else's highlight reel. That will always feel discouraging. Stop doing that. Track your lane. Track your effort. Track your consistency. That's it. Comparison steals patience. And patience is required when results lag. You have a choice. You can keep asking, why don't I feel further along? Or you can ask, did I do the work today? One question weakens you. The other strengthens you. Choose wisely. Here's a hard truth. If you only continue when it feels good, you're training yourself to quit. You're reinforcing instability. But if you continue regardless of mood, you're building a mind that doesn't quit. That's the entire theme of this book. Mental toughness is emotional neutrality toward effort. You show up. You execute. You move on. No celebration. No self-pity. Just progress over time. That's the key. Remember this. Some days feel unproductive, but are actually foundational. Some days feel powerful but add very little. Feelings are misleading. Systems and actions are not. Trust the boring metrics. They compound quietly. And one day, results appear. Not suddenly, but undeniably. You look back and realize it was working all along. You just stopped listening to your emotions. Good. You've learned to stop measuring emotionally. Next, we go deeper. Because even with discipline and systems, there's one thing that destroys progress faster than failure. Noise. Boring repetition builds unbreakable minds. Everyone wants the breakthrough. Nobody wants the boredom. That's the problem. Breakthroughs are built on thousands of unglamorous reps. Not talent. Not luck. Not intensity bursts. Repetition. Boring repetition. Say it clearly. Boring repetition builds unbreakable minds. That's the key. Social media hides the boring middle. You see highlights. Before and after photos. Wins without the wait. What you don't see are the quiet mornings, the same routine, the same work done again and again with no applause. That middle is where most people quit. Not because it's hard, but because it's boring. And boredom exposes impatience. You have a choice. You can respect the boring middle, or you can chase excitement and stay average. There is no third option. High performers understand this early. They stop looking for stimulation. They stop waiting for novelty. They commit to repetition. Because repetition builds identity. Every boring rep is a vote for the person you're becoming. Miss enough reps, and your identity weakens. Stack enough reps, and quitting stops being an option. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Let's talk about why boredom feels dangerous. Boredom doesn't give feedback. No rush. No dopamine spike. Just effort. And the brain hates that. The brain wants variety. Drama. Emotion. Discipline doesn't care. Discipline asks one question. Did you do the work? That's it. Boring repetition trains your mind to stop negotiating. Because negotiation is the enemy. Every time you ask, "Do I feel like it today?" you delay progress. Rules remove negotiation. Repetition removes excuses. That's the key. Look at students who win long-term. They don't study harder once. They study consistently. Same time. Same desk. Same routine. It's boring. And it works. Look at athletes. The best aren't doing magical workouts. They're doing basics over and over, with precision. Same drills. Same form. For years. Boring. Unbreakable. Entrepreneurs? Same thing. Daily execution. Follow-ups. Refinement. No fireworks. Just consistency. Boring repetition compounds. Excitement doesn't. Say the mantra. Boring done daily beats exciting done rarely. Say it again. Boring done daily beats exciting done rarely. That's the key. Excitement is unreliable. It comes and goes. Boredom is predictable. And predictable systems build unstoppable momentum. Most people fail because they try to make everything feel interesting. They switch plans. Switch routines. Switch goals. They call it exploring. It's avoidance. You don't need their permission to stick with one thing longer than feels comfortable. You don't need excitement to justify consistency. Boredom means you're doing it right. That's a reframe you must adopt. Boredom is not a signal to stop. It's a signal to stay. That's how staying power is built. Here's the truth. If you can stay consistent when nothing is happening, you will be unstoppable when something finally does. Because when results appear, your identity is already solid. You're not dependent on progress. You're dependent on process. That's strength. Let's make this practical. You need boring rules. Not ambitious goals. Rules you follow regardless of mood. I study for 90 minutes every weekday. I train 5 days a week. I write 1 page every day. No negotiation. Rules turn repetition into autopilot. Autopilot removes emotion. Emotion creates inconsistency. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Another mistake people make is quitting right before compounding kicks in. Repetition has a delay. Longer than you want. That delay filters out the impatient. Most people quit at rep 30. Winners are built at rep 300. And the mind that survives boredom can survive pressure, failure, and doubt. That's why this chapter matters. Boredom trains resilience. It teaches you to act without stimulation. That skill transfers everywhere. Exams, careers, relationships, life. You become reliable. And reliability beats brilliance. Every time. You have a choice. You can keep chasing motivation, or you can train monotony tolerance. One leads to burnout. The other leads to mastery. Choose wisely. Here's a hard instruction. Stop trying to feel inspired. Start trying to be consistent. Stop asking if it's working. Ask if you're repeating. Repetition is the work. The work is the win. If you did the reps, the day counts. Even if it felt dull. Especially if it felt dull. That's the key. Because dull days are the test. Anyone can show up when it's exciting. Only disciplined people show up when it's boring. And discipline compounds. Remember this. Your future confidence will not come from hype. It will come from memory. Memory of showing up on days you wanted to quit. Memory of doing boring work without validation. That memory becomes unbreakable self-trust. And self-trust beats motivation. Every time. You don't need their permission to commit to boring excellence. You don't need applause to repeat what works. Now you understand repetition. Next, you must understand something deeper. Because even with repetition, there is one habit that silently destroys momentum and fractures focus. Talking too much. Learn to reset, not restart. Most people don't fail because they fall. They fail because they panic. They miss one day, one workout, one study session, one promise to themselves. And instead of resetting, they restart. Restarting sounds noble. It's not. Restarting is emotional. Resetting is disciplined. That's the difference. Tough minds don't panic after setbacks. They reset fast. That's the key. Here is the rule you must burn into your mind. Missing one day is human. Missing two becomes identity. Say it again. Missing one day is human. Missing two becomes identity. That's not motivation. That's math. Identity is built through repetition. So is failure. Most people turn a small slip into a full collapse because they attach meaning to it. I messed up. I ruined the streak. I'll start again Monday. That's weakness disguised as logic. You don't need their permission to stop dramatizing mistakes. You don't need your feelings' permission either. You have a choice. You can interpret a miss as evidence you're failing. Or you can treat it as a signal to reset immediately. That's the key. Resetting means this. No guilt. No stories. No waiting. You return to the rule at the next available opportunity. That's it. No emotional recovery period. No punishment. No restart ceremony. Discipline doesn't need closure. It needs action. Let's talk about why restarting is dangerous. Restarting reinforces the idea that progress depends on perfection. It doesn't. Progress depends on recovery speed. How fast do you return after friction? That's the real metric. High performers don't avoid mistakes. They minimize downtime. They don't spiral. They don't negotiate. They reset. Immediately. Because discipline is rule-based, not emotion-based. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Think about exams. A bad mock test. Most students panic. They overthink. They lose confidence. They abandon the schedule. They restart later. The disciplined student resets the same day. They review. They adjust. They continue. No drama. That's why pressure reveals the real you. Pressure doesn't change you. It shows you. And setbacks reveal whether your system is emotional or structured. You have a choice. You can build a system that collapses under imperfection, or one that absorbs mistakes and keeps moving. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. You need reset rules, not recovery moods. Rules that trigger automatically when you slip. Here are non-negotiables. If you miss one workout, you train the next scheduled session. No doubling. No punishment. If you miss one study block, you show up for the next one. No making up with exhaustion. If you break a streak, you restart the rule immediately. Not tomorrow. Not Monday. Now. Rules remove negotiation. Negotiation creates delay. Delay creates quitting. Reset rules protect momentum. That's the key. Another truth you must accept. Consistency is not about never missing. It's about never missing twice. That's it. This removes pressure. And pressure causes panic. Panic causes quitting. Resetting removes panic. You stop asking, "How do I feel about this?" You ask, "What does the rule say?" That's discipline. That's stability. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. People who rely on emotional recovery take too long to come back. They need to feel better first. They need motivation to return. They wait. Waiting kills progress. Rules don't wait. Rules act. Here's a powerful identity shift. Stop seeing setbacks as failures. See them as tests of reset speed. Your job is not to be perfect. Your job is to return faster than last time. That's growth. That's maturity. That's mental toughness. You don't need their permission to stop explaining yourself. You don't owe guilt anything. Guilt is useless. It doesn't build habits. Action does. Another hard truth. Restarting feeds procrastination. Because restarting feels clean. Resetting feels boring. And boring discipline builds strong minds. You already know this. Every time you restart, you delay discomfort. Resetting embraces it immediately. That's why few people do it. That's why it works. Say this line. I don't restart. I reset. Say it again. I don't restart. I reset. That's the key. Now understand the deeper layer. Resetting protects identity. Restarting breaks it. Every restart says, I'm the kind of person who quits when things aren't perfect. Every reset says, I'm the kind of person who returns without drama. Which identity do you want reinforced? You have a choice. Identity compounds. So does weakness. Resetting also teaches self-respect. You stop bargaining with yourself. You stop letting one bad day define you. That's power. That's quiet confidence. And confidence built this way doesn't disappear under pressure. Because it's not emotional. It's procedural. That's the key. Here's a simple instruction. Lower your tolerance for delay. Not for mistakes. Mistakes will happen. Delay is optional. Reset immediately. This one skill will outperform motivation, inspiration, and hype. Because life will keep hitting you. Stress. Fatigue. Disappointment. You can't control that. But you can control how quickly you return. And return speed determines trajectory. Remember this. Strong minds aren't unbreakable. They're reparable. Fast. Now you know how to reset. One chapter remains. Because discipline is not just behavior. It's identity. You've learned how to act. Now it's time to lock in who you become. Become the person who doesn't quit. This is where everything locks in. Not motivation. Not emotion. Identity. Mental toughness is not a mood. It's not something you feel on good days and lose on bad ones. Mental toughness is an identity. It's who you are when nobody is watching. When nothing feels rewarding. When quitting feels logical. Especially then. Most people live by negotiation. They ask themselves questions all day. Do I feel like it? Is this worth it? Maybe I'll do it later. That inner debate is the real problem. Because the moment you negotiate, discipline is already losing. You don't need their permission to stop negotiating with yourself. You don't need motivation's permission either. You have a choice. You can be the person who debates actions. Or the person who executes by default. That's the key. The strongest people are boringly consistent. Not because life is easy for them. But because they removed decision-making from moments of pressure. They don't ask, should I show up? They already decided. That decision was made long before things got hard. That's identity. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who finishes. I am someone who does not quit. Say it clearly. Say it without emotion. Identity does not need hype. Identity needs repetition. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Most people quit quietly. They don't announce it. They drift. They miss one day. Then another. Then they slowly become someone else. Not because they chose to quit. but because they stopped choosing to stay. That's the danger. Quitting isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's silent. That's why identity must be louder than feelings. You must decide who you are before pressure arrives. Because pressure is guaranteed. Stress will come. Failure will come. Doubt will come. You know this. The only variable is who you become when it does. Here's the identity shift. You stop seeing hard moments as signals to slow down. You see them as cues to get calmer. Not emotional. Calmer. Slower breath. Cleaner actions. Simpler focus. You don't speed up. You stabilize. That's maturity. That's strength. That's mental toughness. Repeat this phrase. I don't quit when it gets hard. I get calmer. Say it again. I don't quit when it gets hard. I get calmer. That's the key. Calm execution beats emotional intensity. Every time. Intensity burns out. Calm compounds. This is what separates professionals from amateurs. Professionals don't rise with excitement or collapse with stress. They operate. Same pace. Same standards. Same rules. That's identity. Think about the people you respect. They don't talk much about motivation. They don't post quotes daily. They just do the work. Again. And again. And again. That's not talent. That's identity reinforced through discipline. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Now let's make this practical. You must remove quitting as an option. Not emotionally. Structurally. You don't say, I'll try not to quit. You say, quitting is not on the table. Then you design rules around that truth. You don't ask, can I handle this? You ask, what is the next action? One action. Then another. This shrinks overwhelming days into manageable steps. And manageable steps build unbreakable minds. Another instruction. Stop romanticizing comfort. Comfort is expensive. It costs growth. It costs respect. It costs confidence. Discomfort is not the enemy. Avoidance is. The person who doesn't quit doesn't love discomfort. They simply tolerate it without drama. They don't label it as dangerous. They label it as normal. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can build a life where every hard moment triggers resistance. Or a life where hard moments trigger focus. That's the key. Remember this truth. You don't become tough by surviving easy days. You become tough by behaving consistently on hard ones. That behavior eventually becomes automatic. Automatic behavior becomes identity. Identity becomes destiny. No motivation required. That's freedom. And freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is not needing to ask yourself whether you'll show up. It's already decided. Now hear this clearly. You will still feel doubt. You will still feel tired. You will still feel resistance. The goal was never to eliminate those. The goal was to stop obeying them. Feelings can exist. They just don't get a vote. That's discipline. That's adulthood. That's strength. Say it. My feelings don't decide my actions. Again. My feelings don't decide my actions. That's the key. This book was never about becoming extreme. It was about becoming reliable. Reliable to yourself. Because self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Not hype. Not affirmations. Proof. Daily proof. And proof comes from staying when quitting feels reasonable. From resetting instead of restarting. From acting when emotions say wait. From boring repetition. From calm execution. From identity. Now this is the final instruction. Decide who you are. Not someday. Now. Decide what kind of person you become under pressure. Then act accordingly. Every day. Without negotiating. Without waiting. Without asking permission. You don't need their permission. You don't need motivation. You don't need perfect conditions. You need identity. And you already know the words. Say them one last time. I don't quit when it gets hard. I get calmer. That's who you are now. Act like it. You don't need more motivation. You need a stronger mind. A mind that doesn't panic under pressure. A mind that doesn't collapse when results are slow. A mind that doesn't quit just because things get uncomfortable. Every chapter of this audiobook comes down to one truth. You have a choice, every single day. You can follow feelings. Or you can follow standards. You don't need permission. You don't need confidence. You need repetition. So here's the challenge. The next time things get hard, don't escape. Don't distract. Don't quit. Stay. Execute. And become the person who doesn't fold when life applies pressure. That's the work. And it starts now.